Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. So today I have Stephen with me, and welcome, Stephen. I'm so excited to have you on.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
That's so cool. So why don't you just, back up, start from the beginning, and let us know where it all started.
Okay, so when I was a kid, I grew up in a nice upper middle class town on Long Island. We had good schools. I went to public school, and I was an athlete throughout middle school and high school. Never drank. Never really drank in high school except maybe like one time my sophomore year. I got wasted that time. I enjoyed it at the time, but it was just kind of a one-time thing. And I really didn't drink at all or do any drugs or anything like that until I graduated high school. So I was an athlete. I was, a very good kid, a very clean kid with a lot of things. I did wholesome things while I was a kid, and I had great parents. I had a lot of advantages. So it was a good upbringing, and I can't complain. I mean, everything was wonderful. And then when I got into college, I did start drinking there, and I remember really enjoying it, thinking it was, wow, this is great, but it wasn't like the first time that I felt like, oh, this is what I should be doing. It was, just something that I thought was a lot of fun. And I did it kind of just like everybody else, and I joined a fraternity, and I did some cross country and track running in college, and I quit about halfway through my sophomore year, and it was really, it was actually a good decision at the time anyway. But I continued to be an athlete, and I continued to exercise and all that stuff, but I just wasn't part of the team at that time. And I joined a fraternity, and, it was kind of like, in some ways, a bit of a glorified drinking club, but it was actually kind of the norm where I was. It's to that special status of alcohol that getting a hangover was, this thing that, wow, you must have had fun last night or something.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then I really didn't notice that my drinking was actually starting to ramp up until after I turned 21 and I was in my senior year of college. And that was when I could buy liquor for myself. I could drink or buy beer for myself. It was really beer at the time, and I would just be able to drink it anytime that I wanted. And I noticed that right around my early 20s, I would be drinking beer at times where normally I wouldn't. I would be drinking beer when I was alone sometimes, but still totally in control, and in control throughout my 20s till maybe by the time I was 30. I think I was kind of a gray area drinker. I started to be drinking rum and cokes by myself and be getting drunk and, be thinking, why am I doing this? And, not really having a good time doing it. So, it changed very slowly over time. It was a slow slide for me, and it wasn't catalyzed by anything in particular. But until I was a father to be, when I met my wife, we got pregnant after being together 4 months. And it was really stressful for me. It was really, really a hard time to make the adjustments that I needed to make. And I was totally in love with her. And that, hadn't happened. Within the first few months of meeting anybody, I was trying really hard to meet somebody before I met my wife. I actually took a break from doing that because, I was doing dating websites and stuff before I met my wife. And I was taking a break from it because it was just, I met nice people, but it just, like nothing ever really panned out for the long term, even, with trying. And I stopped trying. And then lo and behold, I actually met my wife through a friend of a friend. And we got pregnant, within 4 months. And it was scary to me because I didn't really know her. And the whole time I had to quickly adjust because I always wanted to get married and have a family. It was kind of something that I was sort of programmed to do, but it was something that appealed to me. I wanted to have children, but I just, didn't really have the time to adjust. And I started drinking in earnest to relieve stress at that point. And my drinking really, really ramped up at that time. And, my wife had some people who had problems with alcohol in her family. And, I think we all kind of do anyway, but you know, some people who were close to her as well. And, you know, I think she started to recognize it first, that my drinking was something that was off. And I remember this one time in particular, and this was maybe when my son was about a year old, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I remember just being totally wasted at the beach, having rum runners at this beach bar, which was totally like a dream for me. I mean, like a bar by the beach, and they had good food and everything, and the rum runners were really strong, you know, like a lot of liquor in them. And I remember I kind of like, I raised my hand to her because I was angry with her, but like, you know, almost just in a manner to scare her. But it was like, you know, I definitely didn't hit her, but like, you know, what she was saying was like, you know, during that time, like, you know, I was scared that you were going to hit me. And I was thinking, well, I knew that I wasn't going to, but it made me think, like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm being a tough guy now, you know, like with my wife, you know, it's ridiculous. You know, you start to, I don't know, you sink lower and lower and lower sometimes until you actually say, what the hell was that? Like, what kind of a person am I? What have I become, you know?
Yeah.
And so then I started to think, okay, well, my wife had probably for a couple of months before that, because it was getting worse and worse, she pleaded for me to start going to AA. And then I started going to AA. And right after that happened, because it was kind of like a flashbulb thing for me. And then I struggled for about 3 years. I read Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Drinking. I read Craig Beck's Alcohol Lied to Me. And I think it wasn't really, I know that your book had a lot of the same elements that were in those books, and you had borrowed and cited thoughts from some of those other books, but so it was kind of like a conglomeration of those things for me to like get that practice through my head again. But there was also some other research on what alcohol does to you. You know, I knew that you narrated it yourself, and you seemed to be pretty into the whole thing. Like, you were very believable in terms of what you were saying, that you cared about it. And it was like, you know, removing that unconscious thing, the cravings stopped. And like, after 3 years of struggling with it, and there was like a period of 7 months where I tried to moderate, and it was a disaster. But after all of that time, though, it was finally like, you know, the one thing that works for me. And I think I was moving along on the process the whole time in some way. And sometimes I was ignoring it, and I think I was actually backsliding. But, you know, once I got through your book, I listened to it about 10 times initially, like seriously, because I wanted to make sure I got it through my head, because it was working. And it's been about 7 months now, and it's the longest it's ever been. But it's not just that, it's been effortless, though. It's been wonderful.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow, what a cool story. And I think I mean, over and over I hear that, like people listening to it multiple times. There's a guy, he's actually a doctor in the UK, and he would put parts of it on just repeat as he fell asleep. And he's like, that's what, you know, really worked, you know, just to get it very much embedded. But that's, wow, what a cool story. So, you know, now, how are things? Like, if you were going to go back and, you know, talk to the you of being afraid of having a baby with this woman you've only been dating for 4 months, and, you know, like, how are things? What would you tell him?
Well, I would tell him that, like, you're going to be a great father. You're gonna love your kids, and it's if I had the foresight, or the hindsight, I guess, in order to be able to say it to him, I'd say it's gonna work out with your wife. She's everything that you think that she might be in terms of being a wonderful person. This is all for real, and you're gonna fall in love with her even more. And you know, she's gonna be a great mother, so you're gonna be okay. And even if you didn't have all of those things, you still should think about freeing yourself from drinking or whatever. Like, yes, it is a problem. Understand that it is a problem, and understand that alcoholism is not really that binary. And you don't have to be terrified to be an alcoholic or whatever. You know, it doesn't matter. That's not the whole issue. Does it feel like a problem? If it does, then maybe it is. And that not drinking is actually really awesome, and drinking is really poison. And society loves it so much, but like there's nothing really special about it. You don't really know how good you can feel, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And how have your friends been?
My friends have been pretty supportive. I have one friend who's been, been very, very much going through this journey with me. Actually, it's funny with him because, and we'll get into some other people and what happens with them. But with this guy, he was drinking. He could drink like 20 Miller Lights in a day. My friend, and he would not get drunk. I mean, he was at the time he's lost a bunch of weight because he quit drinking and started eating better. But he was about 230 pounds at the time, and he could drink 22 Miller Lights, not even get like a buzz, and he'd drink them throughout the day. But if he tried to drink them faster, it would be hard for him to get drunk because he had a lot of tolerance and he was a pretty big guy. And I think at that point, he wasn't really having as much trouble, like, blackout, like hangover or something like that. His wife like pleading with him, affecting his ability to, be like present as much, be as good of a father as he could be. And maybe it was to some degree, but it was what people would call less of a problem than I had. And he wanted to control alcohol. So he saw, the cover of the book or whatever, or the cover of the Audible thing says control alcohol. It's the book you buy to control alcohol. And if you read the reviews, you get an idea that most of the people want to quit or whatever. But he said that it kind of hypnotized him into quitting, actually. So he was at a year, and I just celebrated 1 year with him. And there was a sales I think it was sales podcast that he actually just sent me a link to, that you were featured on the podcast, and the interviewers had read This Naked Mind, and I believe they stopped drinking as well. I listened to the podcast. I don't know if they did for good, but it definitely changed their attitude.
Was it The Grind, maybe?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that was really a fun one. That was a cool one to do. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, he's into sales. He's a sales guy. So he's been great because, like, he was showing me, like, well, here's another example of somebody who you can talk to, and he's my best friend. I mean, he's been my best friend for years. But he would say, I would look at him and say, yeah, he didn't even have what society would call a problem or whatever, and and actually nobody really even knew that I had a problem. My wife knew me. She knew what was up. I mean, she knows me better than just about anybody, and she was spending a lot of time with me and knew me well enough then, you know what I mean? And she saw the ugly side of me too when I was drinking. So she was right. So it's been great. And like my other friends, I mean, there was one incident where when I was trying to moderate, I actually had to go to the hospital because I think my blood alcohol content was a little bit too high, and my responses weren't satisfactory, right? So to say that I was okay. And so I used to identify also with being an alcoholic and that I was going to AA. So, when the things that I would tell people, they knew, hey, some things were really going on, like with him. So my friends are all very supportive, but they've given my friend Bruce, they've given him a lot of hassle for him quitting or whatever, because there's no, oh, well, you're an alcoholic, you don't get to have as much fun or something. So they can't do that with him, to make themselves feel better. He was just a guy who decided drinking's making me fat. It's making me sluggish. I'm getting hangovers. It's taking about half the week to do this. I'm not even really getting drunk. And like, I just don't enjoy it anymore, is what he thought.
I've literally had people tell me like that, even though they don't feel like they're an alcoholic, they want to say that to their friends because their friends react so much better. There's so much more support when we feel like, okay, we know how to deal with that. Like, just put you in a box. We can feel kind of sorry for you, but it doesn't have anything to do with us because there's this segment and but I'm not. So it's this us them thing. Whereas if one of us stops, like you say, your friend, then it's this whole different dynamic that people really struggle with.
Right. And now I don't identify with being an alcoholic anymore. But I will say that I had a drinking problem. And I think to most people, it's the same thing. But to me it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess it sounds a little nicer, but I don't need it for my ego though, because honestly, like, when people perceive what you're saying, it's really about what's in their ego. And the truth is that I did have a drinking problem, So with my friend, he doesn't want to say it because it's really just not true. You know what I mean? He feels like he can't, and I respect that. I think that's excellent for him, to be able
And I think it's so powerful too, in a way, because like for me, certainly drinking was problematic. Like it was a problem. Like I was definitely, even if it wasn't really truly physically addicted, I was definitely emotionally addicted, definitely psychologically addicted. And so, I was certainly addicted to alcohol. But when somebody stops drinking, because I've had a lot of people randomly, read my book for a friend or a friend of a friend, and then they decide, I'm not going to drink anymore. It is really powerful, because I think that that's where people do stop and take a lot of notice. It's not that they're like, wait a second, you're just making this as like a good, healthy choice. That's a really different thing. And that's really cool. I love to see that.
Sure. And on the topic of health, my health has improved so much since I stopped drinking. I've not been drinking for a full-on 7 months, but I think maybe, I don't know, my spirit and my attitude has changed since reading This Naked Mind. It clicked for me. And, I started exercising very regularly. My doctor told me that I have some early onset arthritis in my hip, and I'm 37 years old. So I said to myself, well, I really like running, and I've always been like a fast runner. I used to run in college and stuff, and I've always been kind of heavy for being a runner, for as fast as I was able to go. So I've always been pounded on my joints for many years, and running's a little rough on your joints. So I thought maybe I should, if I want to keep doing this for a while or whatever, I should lose some weight. So I went on a diet before I started running again, because I thought trying to lose weight while I was running, I was just going to get injured or something. But anyway, I went on a diet. Lost about 22 pounds in total since I've been alcohol free. And, I've just been exercising regularly. The sleep I get is so much better. If anything, I sleep less because I spend a lot of time like making my own food and stuff like that. So I eat better nutritionally. But, I used to need so much more sleep, or I used to feel so much more sluggish. And now it's like even 5 hours will do it for me. And it's like sustainable. I get the greatest sleep now. Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, I had 2 young kids when I was drinking a lot. And I remember the ages where they weren't sleeping through the night just being literally torture. Like and I was just thinking like, nobody can survive this. This is miserable. This is making me absolutely a horrible human. And then, my daughter just turned a year. And so this past year, she hasn't been sleeping through the night the entire time. And it's been in fits and spurts and stuff, but it doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't affect me at all. I can wake up 3 or 4 times with her and still wake up fine, and I'm like, wow, what's the difference? Because by the way, the gap between my son is 9 and my daughter is 1. So it's a 9-year gap. So I was 30 when I had my son, and I'm going to be 40 this year. So my age is like, would say I should have less energy. I should need, but it's the exact opposite. I have so much more energy, which is so cool. And you just
Right.
seem to be like, just looking at you seem to be so incredibly healthy, like, just, very fit. And yeah, you can just tell. And I think mainly where I can always tell, and I look at old photos of myself, is in the eyes, presence and the clarity in the eyes. And you just can really tell that. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost have some sense too when you walk into a room and you can kind of look at people, and I'm like, oh, I bet that person doesn't drink. I can just literally in their eyes notice, like, they're just not a drinker.
Wow.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So this is awesome. Is there any other things that you want to share, like any advice or any things that just really have helped you along the journey?
Well, one thing that I want to share that's just amazing is, and I never really knew about this until I was quit for, I don't know, about maybe 4 or 5 months. I started really feeling it, even 3, is that like, and earlier than that too. It's just there was a lot of brain fog and a lot of ups and downs. And actually, I kind of want to get into that too, because that's on the more in the advice category. But when you get to a little bit of time not drinking, so your body kind of has a chance to recover a little bit and adjust, and your mind does as well. The ability to experience joy. And you went over that a lot in your book. It's totally true. Like drinking steals your joy, and just about any addiction steals your joy too. And I used to be addicted to nicotine. I was smoking those e-cigarettes, before I quit drinking. And I think when about 18 days after I quit drinking, I stopped smoking the e-cigarettes. I went cold turkey on the nicotine, and it was kind of because I wanted to get over that I need something kind of feeling, and it actually made things a lot easier. But to be addiction free, the ability to experience joy is something that I think was just slowly taken away from me, like health, getting fat, feeling sluggish, all of that stuff. I just never really realized how wonderful it was, because the last time, I had this kind of drug-free everything going on was before, I quit drinking, was when I was maybe 20 years old or something like that, a little bit younger. So the ability to experience joy is wonderful. And, I just being with my kids, I mean, they're ages 4 and 2, I enjoy it a lot more. And they can be totally annoying and, whatever, they give me a hassle, but honestly, it's who cares, I'm not as stressed out. I love the experiences that I have in life. I'm falling in love with the process of doing certain things or whatever, and I wrote a post on your blog to get into, just that brain fog kind of stuff at about 6 months quit. I think it was my 6-month anniversary or somewhere around there. And I wrote about the 2-month fog and how there were just periods of time where I had brain fog and felt like crap, 2 months after quitting. And I don't know, there's physical and then there's psychological addiction and all of this stuff. But I think kind of when your brain just might take a little bit longer to adjust sometimes, and it's in terms of thought and your experience, sometimes you have a little bit of ups and downs. And I wrote about just how they go away. And so if you're going through one of those periods and you're at 2 months or 3 months or whatever, think about mark this in your mind and then write it out until it goes away, because it will. And remember that and store that in your memory. Think about it. Think about how you felt the whole time and when it went away, because that's what's always going to happen. It's always going to, if it happens and you hit a trough for a little while, it's going to go away and it's going to give way to better days. And you have to remember that, because every single time it happens. And when you say, oh yeah, that's going to happen, then the next time that happens, you remember it and it's no big deal. You're not uh-oh, is this what not drinking's really going to be like? Until how long? How long do I have until this goes away? It's well, it'll always go away, and then it'll just go away for good. And now I'm at 7 months now. It's not really a lot of time, but I knew 2 weeks into this quit that I was done, which as an addict, somebody who's been an addict for a really long time, I've quit smoking so many times in my life, and I've quit drinking a whole bunch of times too. But I could never trust myself with something like that at 2 weeks. It was ridiculous, but it just, my mindset was changed. I didn't crave it anymore. And I just think it's just a bunch of shiz. So, and I thought that at 2 weeks, so.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I think it's such an important topic, because we do. I mean, who knows how long it takes for us to adjust? Who knows how long it takes for our brains and our bodies to get kind of our mojo back? And who knows what other stuff that we've been drinking to numb that comes up that we actually have to deal with and get through. And so I think that advice is just huge, massive. And yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate that, because I think people really need to hear that. So often, you know, people who are really kind of telling their stories, they have been more than 6 months, more than a year. And so, yeah, at some point it does become, you know, all just sparkles and joy. But there is a time there where it is a massive adjustment. And I think it's something that we don't probably talk about enough, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Really cool.
And now I feel like, since my unconscious has been convinced, through repetition, I think I needed to listen more than once. But now that it's been convinced, I could have like the worst year like ever or whatever, and I'm not drinking. Like, no way. I went to a wedding on this past St. Pat's Day, and you know, it was at an old like an old saloon, like this historic bar place or whatever, in Massachusetts, like where they do weddings and functions and stuff like that on St. Pat's Day. And you know, it was like the drinkiest like event that I could possibly think of. And you know, some of my friends got wasted, a few of them, you know, most people just, you know, drank their share, like for St. Pat's Day. And it was a great setup, because you know, in Boston the bars are always like so packed on St. Pat's Day too, you know. And you know, I should certainly mention that the people who were getting married were really great people too. And you know, my wife and I was kind of like, we're friends with them, but we're not like super close with them, so we could have ended up going or not really. So there was no like obligation to just kind of make the rounds and talk to everybody and make sure that we tell the bride and groom's family what a wonderful time it was or whatever. But I took that time to just spread like love and joy, because I was feeling good. Like, I enjoyed myself a lot. I saw everything that was going on. I danced like, you know, like a dork or whatever. I like enjoyed it so much, you know what I mean? I had so much fun, you know, and yeah, I am a lot more fun, and I'm a lot more funny, and I dance better and like whatever, you know, when I'm sober. And I went, you know, I made sure to go and tell everybody, you know, we're wonderful. This is a great venue, whatever. Like, yeah, okay, I don't drink or whatever, but it was a great venue. It was actually like, you know, really kind of cool, like historic, like saloon spot or whatever. Like, you know, just so, I mean, just to tell everybody, you know, thank you so much for having us. You know, just all of the things that I don't know, I would have just numbed myself out from like, you know, being on my game or whatever, you know, and just been like a drunk guy on St. Pat's Day, like, you know, at a wedding. And like you said, it homogenizes life. It just puts you like in a haze. Like, who cares what you're doing? You're drunk, you know? So
Right.
no more of that is wonderful, you know, even on that day, especially on that day.
Yeah, exactly. It's the things that you think are going to be the hardest that end up being like, this is really fun. Like you know, if people are like, I'm never going to get through this vacation or whatever. And you're like, actually, vacations are still the best, even
Yeah,
more so, right?
yeah,
So,
they
so
are.
cool. That's
Yeah.
so awesome. So I kind of asked you this question already, and we've kind of been through it, but I'm gonna ask you again because I always finish with this question. But like, if you could go back and just tell yourself about, you know, what life is like on this other side, what would you tell yourself before you quit?
I don't think I would have believed me, but I'll say it. Yeah. I would have said, quitting drinking seems like it's going to be hard, and it seems like it's going to be, something that you'll be deprived of now, something that you might want to do, but really, you don't want to do it. You can get to a spot where you actually really don't want to do it. You don't crave it. And think about, you know, if since you're having problems with drinking, think about the fact that, you know, if you quit drinking, like that would be good, right? But why would you feel like you still need to drink? You know, all of those other reasons, you know, that are aside from you, they're all for other people. You know, fitting in socially and all of that stuff. You know, that people think it's weird, like if you don't want to drink or something like that. Honestly, it's just been such um, a blessing not to have to drink, that I don't really care if anybody thinks that it's weird or whatever. I just don't even want to deal with it. And so, you know, you can feel like your future self, and you're actually going to enjoy it, and you're going to be carefree. And it's going to make you able to do things that, you never really thought that you could do in terms of self-discipline, having energy. Like, you're just going to feel a lot better. You're going to be yourself. You don't even know who yourself really is because you've been drinking for so long.
Oh, that's so cool. It gives me chills. That's just awesome. So good. Well, thank you so much. I love your story. I think, I don't know, you have such a good presence and energy and just great like vibes. And I just really, really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much for showing up and telling it. And I know that, you know, it's just going to be super impactful for a lot of people.
So thank you. And I enjoyed this conversation too. And I want to tell you, Annie, that you've helped me out a lot in my life. And, you know, you are one of my personal heroes, like in life. You know, you're on the short list. You know, what you're doing here is really amazing. And, you know, I mean, just the fact that, you know, you wrote a book and I picked it up and read it and you helped me so much. I'm just one of those people, you know. You could just, I mean, one after the other, you know, you have a lot of readers. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm not good at accepting it, but I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been Annie Grace with This Naked Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more at thisnakedmind.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps us spread the word.